Imagine waking up in a world where the United States doesn't exist. No New York City. No White House. No Hollywood. No Silicon Valley. Just a vast continent stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific, home to millions of people who had never heard the word America. Then, in just over 4 centuries, everything changed. A handful of struggling colonies grew into one of the most powerful nations in human history. The United States survived revolutions, civil war, economic collapse, and 2 world wars. It sent astronauts to the moon, invented technologies that changed everyday life, and became a nation that shaped the modern world. But none of it was guaranteed. Every turning point could have ended differently. So how did 13 small British colonies become a global superpower? Long before European ships crossed the Atlantic, North America was already home to millions of people. Hundreds of indigenous nations lived across the continent. Each had its own language, its own traditions, its own way of life. The Haudenosaunee built one of the world's oldest democratic alliances. The Cherokee developed thriving farming communities. The Pueblo peoples constructed impressive adobe cities in the Southwest. Farther west, thousands of tribes lived among mountains, forests, rivers, and coastlines rich with natural resources. These civilizations traded with one another, raised families, created art, and built cultures that had flourished for thousands of years. To them, this wasn't a new world. It was simply home. Everything began to change in the late 1400s. European explorers arrived searching for new trade routes, precious metals, and opportunities for powerful kingdoms across the Atlantic. Spain explored the south. France traveled deep into the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River. The Dutch established trading posts along the Hudson River, and Britain focused on the Atlantic coast. First, most settlements were small and fragile. Harsh winters, food shortages, and conflict made survival incredibly difficult. Many early colonies disappeared before they had a chance to grow. But one settlement managed to survive, and it would change history forever. In 1607, England established Jamestown in present-day Virginia, the first permanent English settlement in North America. Life was brutal. Many settlers arrived expecting to find gold. Instead, they found hunger and unfamiliar conditions. During the colony's first years, more than half of the settlers died. Jamestown nearly collapsed, but the colony survived. And with the rise of tobacco farming, it finally became profitable. Without anyone realizing it, a small settlement on the edge of the Atlantic had just laid the foundation for what would eventually become the United States. Jamestown wasn't alone for long. In 1620, another group of English settlers crossed the Atlantic aboard a small ship called the Mayflower. Unlike the settlers at Jamestown, many of these newcomers weren't searching for wealth. They were searching for religious freedom. After a difficult 66-day voyage, they landed far north of Virginia, in what is now Massachusetts. Before stepping onto shore, they signed an agreement known as the Mayflower Compact. It was a simple promise. The colonists would govern themselves and make decisions together. It became one of the earliest examples of self-government in English America. Over the next century, more colonies appeared along the Atlantic coast. Some were founded for trade, others for farming, others as places where people could practice their religion freely. By the early 1700s, there were 13 British colonies stretching from New Hampshire to Georgia. Together, they were home to more than 2 million people. Each colony had its own governor, its own economy, and its own identity, but they all answered to one king, King George III. For many years, the colonies prospered. Farmers grew crops. Merchants traded across the Atlantic. Ports like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Charleston became busy centers of commerce. Then Britain faced a problem. After winning the French and Indian War, the British government owed enormous debts. To pay them, Parliament began taxing the American colonies. The Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the Tea Act. Many colonists were furious. They argued that they had no representatives in Parliament. Their message became simple: no taxation without representation. Protests spread from colony to colony. In 1773, angry colonists boarded British ships in Boston Harbor. They dumped more than 300 chests of tea into the water. The event became known as the Boston Tea Party. Britain responded with harsh punishments. Instead of restoring order, it united the colonies against the Crown. On April 19, 1775, fighting broke out at Lexington and Concord. The American Revolution had begun. What started as a colonial protest quickly became a war for independence. Written primarily by Thomas Jefferson, the document declared that all people were created equal and possessed certain unalienable rights. including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The words inspired millions. But winning independence would take years of sacrifice. Poorly equipped American soldiers faced the most powerful military in the world. Against all odds, the colonies refused to surrender, and history was about to change forever. The Revolutionary War lasted for 8 long years. The Continental Army was often outnumbered, outgunned, and undersupplied. But under the leadership of George Washington, the Americans refused to give up. Then, in 1781, everything changed. At the Battle of Yorktown, American and French forces surrounded the British Army. After weeks of fighting, British General Charles Cornwallis surrendered. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris officially ended the war. Britain recognized the United States as an independent nation. For the first time, a new country stood on the world stage. Winning independence was only the beginning. The new nation still had no strong central government. The first system, known as the Articles of Confederation, gave most power to the states. It quickly became clear that it wasn't enough. So in 1787, delegates gathered in Philadelphia. Their goal was simple: create a government strong enough to unite the country, but limited enough to protect individual freedom. The result was the United States Constitution. It divided power into 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. It became one of the most influential political documents in history. In 1789, George Washington was sworn in as the first president of the United States. The American experiment had officially begun. The young republic grew faster than anyone imagined. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson purchased the Louisiana Territory from France. The purchase doubled the size of the United States overnight. Soon, explorers Meriwether Lewis and William Clark were sent west to map the new territory. They crossed rivers, climbed mountains, and reached the Pacific Ocean. As settlers moved westward, new towns and new states appeared. But expansion came at a terrible cost. Many Native American nations were forced from their ancestral lands. Communities that had lived there for centuries were displaced through treaties, conflict, and government policies. America was growing, but not everyone benefited equally. By the mid-1800s, the United States faced a crisis that threatened its very existence. The country had expanded from coast to coast. But one question divided the nation more than any other: should slavery continue? Northern states increasingly opposed its expansion. Many southern states believed their economy depended on it. Political disagreements turned into open conflict. In 1861, the American Civil War began. It would become the deadliest war in American history. In 1861, the United States split apart. 11 southern states left the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. The Civil War had begun. It wasn't just a battle over territory. It was a fight over the future of the nation and the institution of slavery. Families fought against families, brother against brother. For 4 brutal years, the country was torn apart. More than 620,000 Americans lost their lives, making it the deadliest conflict in U.S. history. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that enslaved people in Confederate territory were free. 2 years later, the Union achieved victory. Slavery was abolished with the 13th Amendment. The nation had survived, but rebuilding would take generations. After the Civil War, America changed at an incredible pace. Railroads stretched from coast to coast. Factories transformed small towns into booming cities. Millions of immigrants arrived from Europe and Asia, searching for opportunity and a better life. Inventors reshaped everyday living. Thomas Edison brought electric light into homes. Alexander Graham Bell introduced the telephone. Steel, oil, and manufacturing fueled an economic explosion. By the early 1900s, the United States had become one of the world's largest industrial economies. The 20th century brought new challenges. The United States entered World War I in 1917. Just a decade later, the Great Depression left millions unemployed and struggling to survive. Then came World War II. American factories produced ships, aircraft, tanks, and supplies on a scale the world had never seen. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the nation fully entered the war. When the conflict ended in 1945, the United States had emerged as one of the world's leading superpowers. But a new rivalry was already beginning: the Cold War. For decades, the United States and the Soviet Union competed in technology, military strength, and space exploration. On July 20, 1969, millions watched as Apollo 11 landed on the moon. For the first time in history, human beings walked on another world. The decades that followed brought even greater change. Personal computers, the internet, Smartphones, artificial intelligence. Many of the technologies shaping modern life were developed or advanced in the United States. Today, America remains one of the world's largest economies, a global center for innovation, entertainment, and culture. Its history is one of extraordinary achievements, difficult struggles, constant change, and people from every corner of the world working together to build something new. More than 4 centuries ago, the land that would become the United States was home to hundreds of indigenous nations. Then came explorers, colonists, revolutionaries, presidents, inventors, immigrants, soldiers, dreamers. Each generation left its mark on the country. Some chapters brought remarkable progress. Others brought painful lessons. Together they shaped the nation we know today. The story of America is still unfolding, and the next chapter has yet to be written. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments, which moment in American history do you think changed the country the most?